Chapter 198. I can't make the decision. It depends on whether Miss Luo is willing or not. Prince Roy smiled warmly. Compared with his gloominess before, he was probably really happy now. He looked at Princess Lu with a much softer look. What was a good wife? Princess Lu was a good wife. She was anxious for Prince Roy and thought for him. When a man couldn't do anything, he relied on wife diplomacy. As long as there was contact, he didn't have to worry about the relationship. Not to mention other things, just based on this point alone, even 10 Luo Jingyings would not be able to catch up. Originally, she had her own advantages, but unfortunately, she did not have a good relationship with Jingwan and the Luo family. Moreover, it seemed that her IQ was not online. She had already warned her, but she still messed things up. Li Hongming obviously wouldn't fall in love with any woman. In his eyes, there were only value and no value. Could Luo Jingying's value be compared with Princess Lu's? It was impossible before today, and it was even more impossible after today. After Jingwan made it clear that the Luo family didn't care about Luo Jingying, her value was probably only to give birth to a baby. During the pregnancy, she might get some benefits. The so-called benefits came from Princess Lu's care for the baby. It was difficult for her to see Li Hongming again. After giving birth to the baby, Luo Jingying's fate was definitely worrying. Princess Consort's invitation, this subject's daughter does not dare to refuse. The outside of the palace is filled with beautiful mountains, rivers, and sceneries. Occasionally, we can go for a swim or sit down to eat some tea. It would be a beautiful thing. Jingwan smiled as she spoke. It was obvious that Jingwan had secretly changed the concept. Entering Prince Roy's territory and sightseeing outside were two different things. Outside, they could coincidentally meet many people. Instead of two people traveling together, it became many people traveling together. Even if he understood Jingwan's meaning, he could only feel helpless. Since Jingwan was about to leave, Li Hongyuan naturally wouldn't stay. He wasn't interested in playing a brotherly drama. As for drinking, he had good wine. Li Hongming couldn't compare with him. However, when Li Hongyuan was about to leave, Li Hongming was a little surprised. If he came together because he happened to be in the Luo family, although it was unbelievable, it was not unacceptable. They would leave together. Li Hongming glanced at Jingwan and Li Hongyuan with a little curiosity. After the marriage was confirmed, his sixth brother showed some unusual care for the third Miss Luo. This kind of care seemed to go beyond a certain category. Since Li Hongyuan wanted to leave, naturally, no one could stop him. And just at this time, noble consort Su sent someone over. She said that she heard that the third Miss Luo was here and wanted to visit her. Noble consort Su waved at her two sons with some disdain, indicating that they should get out of here quickly and not be an eyesore. Mother, you don't want your sons anymore after you have a daughter-in-law. Li Hongyuan said in a low voice, coquettishly. Is she still your daughter-in-law? You are shameless, but Miss Luo is. Get out of here, get out of here. Don't pretend in front of me. Noble consort Su scolded with a smile. Li Hongyuan thought to himself, I have done what I should and shouldn't do. How can she still be someone else's daughter-in-law? The two brothers were driven away by noble consort Su just like that. Noble consort Su looked at Jingwan again and found that she seemed to be a little shy. She smiled gently. She didn't know if it was because of the makeup, but the corners of noble consort Su's eyes were not so obvious. Naturally, she lost some of her sharpness and looked more gentle. Originally, she was graceful and noble, so it was not easy to get close to her. However, because of this gentleness, she had a good impression of her. It was like you thought that the other party was a flower on a high mountain, but in fact, the other party was especially fond of you. You couldn't help but feel flattered and happy. If it was just an ordinary girl, she would probably think that noble consort Su was a very easy person to get along with. Just think about it. She had been favored in the harem for decades. She could compete with the empress in the harem. Her son was one of the most powerful competitors for the throne. How could such a woman be easy to deal with? The atmosphere created by noble consort Su didn't make Jingwan relax. Instead, it made her more vigilant. When she spoke, she paid special attention to it. It could be said that it was watertight. And Princess Lu quietly accompanied them. Seeing that Jingwan and noble consort Su were competing, one was shy and the other was gentle. Princess Lu sighed secretly in the letter. This sister-in-law was also amazing. After being noble consort Su's daughter-in-law for so many years, she knew very well how powerful noble consort Su was. There were only a few girls who could deal with her freely. No, thinking back, it should be said that Jingwan was the first one she had seen. Thinking back, it was really not worth mentioning. After the two brothers left, Li Hongming wanted to go to Luqingdi to make a good impression, but Li Hongyuan was not interested. Knowing what kind of character he was, Li Hongming didn't care about him. He just teased him for a while and left. Li Hongyuan looked at the direction of noble consort Su's courtyard with a rather deep look. He knew that Jingwan could deal with it, but he also knew that she wouldn't like the atmosphere. He summoned an E and whispered something. Then, he walked around casually and returned to his courtyard. Noble consort Su was talking with Jingwan excitedly when a servant came to report that Great Elder Princess sent someone to invite third Miss Luo to enjoy the flowers. Noble consort Su was slightly stunned. At that moment, the smile in her eyes obviously faded away. In the blink of an eye, she returned to normal. She patted Jingwan's hand and said, "Good girl, you can go now. Don't let your foster mother wait for a long time." Jingwan hesitated for a moment and then bowed to leave. After Jingwan left, noble consort Su became a little indifferent. This girl is good enough for sixth brother, but it's a pity. Princess Lu was slightly confused, but she didn't ask because it was not necessary. She's a good helper. Yuan doesn't need her. Princess Lu understood. She lowered her eyebrows and narrowed her eyes. She wanted to give her son the best, but it was a pity. What happened in your courtyard? The Luo family wouldn't come to them for no reason. I'm about to tell you. Princess Lu told noble consort Su about the Luo Jingying in detail. This kind of thing was known to others, but there was no need to hide it from noble consort Su. When Li Hongming married a Luo Jingying, noble consort Su also felt that there was something fishy. However, she knew that her son didn't take the initiative to mention it, so it shouldn't be a big deal, so she didn't ask. In fact, it was not a big deal that he just slept with a girl who was somewhat rich and powerful. Her character and brain are not good, but her luck is good. Since she is pregnant, just take good care of her. She can't play a role in the Luo family's affairs, so don't worry about it. It's her good fortune to be alive, and it's her fate if she can't be alive. Noble consort Su said and paused. If she is really good at giving birth, it's not bad to keep her and give birth to a few more children. That was to be treated as a pure fertility tool. Princess Lu forced a smile. Although she had seen everything clearly, she still felt bitter in her heart. Mother, you're right. You are still young, and your body is fine. Work hard with Ming, and try to give birth to a legitimate son. Although when you take the position, most of the heirs won't be legitimate sons, I still think highly of you. Princess Lu's eyes reddened. She didn't know if she was really touched or something else. Thank you, mother. Well, you can go back. Deal with the concubine in the backyard. If you don't like her, you don't have to keep her. When the time comes, just keep the child and go to the mother https://www.yangwiwo.com/11/118076653219 www.yangwiwo.com Biku Pavilion M Yangwiwo.com Chapter 199. You're a virtuous director. Imperial Consort Su paused. Even if you can't give birth to a legitimate son, raising one in the future will be the same. You know what Ming-er's personality is like. As long as you do what you need to do, then no one will take away what belongs to you. Her voice was gentle, but the meaning behind her words made people shiver uncontrollably. Princess Lu suppressed the coldness in her heart. No matter what Imperial Consort Su said, she responded respectfully. Of course, she knew Li Hongming's temperament. If she did her job well, what was hers would be hers. These words could be used to coax her a few years ago. Li Hongming didn't seem to be interested in beauty, and he respected his first wife. That was because he needed a good reputation, and that was because she was still useful now. If one day he ascended to that supreme position, Princess Lu was almost certain what would happen. As the saying goes, the more suppressed it was, the more serious it would be when it broke out. What's more, now there was an incomparably carefree and unscrupulous Prince Jean as a comparison. Don't look at how all the princes were deadpan and sanctimonious. To say that they weren't envious and jealous of Jean Qin Wang, it was almost impossible to find them. These people should also include the other children of the imperial clan. Most likely, not a single one of them wasn't thinking, why could he be so unscrupulous, but they couldn't. When there were no more restrictions, it would probably become even worse. It was fine if he didn't meet the woman he liked. Then, if she didn't make a mistake, she probably wouldn't lose the position of Empress. If he met the person he liked, the cold palace might be the best place for her. Princess Lu saw all of this clearly. Her feelings for Li Hongming had long been wiped clean. Li Hongming maintained a good image on the surface, and she also played the role of a good wife and mother. She couldn't quit because of resentment. After all, if she couldn't be a princess, then she was not far from death. Moreover, it wasn't as simple as her life and death. She had 2 daughters. If they had a stepmother, she couldn't imagine what would happen to them. Even if she didn't care about the position of empress, she couldn't imagine that the one who would ascend the throne in the future wouldn't be Li Hongyuan. Because if that happened, her entire family would be destroyed. As the saying goes, one's glory is shared, and one's loss is shared. No matter how bad that man was, she had to help him. Noble Consort Su sent Princess Lu away and sat there thinking. She also found that her youngest son cared about the 3rd young lady of the Luo family very much. But it didn't matter. Whether he really liked her or for other reasons, she wouldn't do the same thing as Duchess Ding. Maybe she would feel a little sad, but she was really scared by her son's reputation of bringing bad luck to his wife. Now they finally had a girl. Master Liaochen said that they were a match made in heaven, and nothing had happened to them until now. Even if she was dissatisfied, she would never show it. Otherwise, if others were inferior, the emperor would be dissatisfied with her. In actuality, she was quite glad that this girl had been given to her son and not to Li Hongyi to be his step-consort. If Madame Lu could sense it, then noble Consort Su, as the person involved, could also sense it. This girl wasn't a simple person. She was well aware of the power of pillow talk. If this talk was unorthodox, then it would be good to use it on the opponent. However, this girl didn't seem like someone who would do evil, so it would only have a positive effect. In addition, this girl had a powerful maternal family. It was good for the person who married her, but bad for the person who married her. Although it was a pity that she couldn't be used, it was better to let her be a useless chess piece than to let others have her. Li Hongyuan's leisure didn't last for 4 hours before Emperor Lu Qingdi summoned him. Li Hongyuan was very annoyed by his old man's summons, but because he had nothing to do, he didn't give his old man a hard time. At this time, Emperor Lu Qingdi had already finished dealing with political affairs, and Prince Rui and the Gong Prince were also present. It was as if the father and son were chatting with Lei. After Li Hongyuan paid his respects, they didn't say anything and just picked up the cup of tea. Who was Li Hongyuan? At the beginning, perhaps he didn't understand the meaning of Emperor Lu Qingdi's words, but Emperor Lu Qingdi made it so obvious. If he still didn't understand, then he would have lived in vain. However, even so, he didn't intend to cooperate well. With a cold face, he looked at Emperor Lu Qingdi, as if to say, "Are you idle?" Emperor Lu Qingdi didn't get a response, and Li Hongyuan's gaze made his balls hurt. He cursed in his heart, "You unfilial son." However, Emperor Lu Qingdi couldn't bring himself to directly ask for it. The others also looked at the confrontation between the father and son, not daring to say a word. It must be said that every time they saw Emperor Lu Qingdi suffer in the hands of Li Hongyuan, as the other sons, they were envious and jealous, but in fact, they were secretly happy. It couldn't be helped, who told them to often be trained like dogs by Emperor Lu Qingdi. So, when they saw him sulking, their hearts secretly rubbed, feeling a great sense of relief. Get lost. Seeing Li Hongyuan was like a wooden stake, Emperor Lu Qingdi was so angry that he smashed the cup again. Li Hongyuan looked at the broken cup that was still 2 steps away from his feet. This old man was really afraid of hurting him, smashing things farther and farther away. Speaking of which, with your attitude, it would be strange if you didn't raise an unfilial son. However, as the saying goes, the heavens cannot be offended. Li Hongyuan only angered him on ordinary trivial matters. If he really became lawless, then no matter how much affection he had, it would be worn away. Li Hongyuan clicked his tongue, when Mu Gonggong, who was outside, heard his master's call, he immediately came in and presented a small box. Li Hongyuan took it and casually threw it to Emperor Li's personal attendant. This was originally prepared for Fu Wang, but I didn't think that Fu Wang would be so impatient. A Ken will retire. Turning around, he leisurely left. Emperor Lu Qingdi was so angry that he almost fell backwards, cursing vile spawn. Vile spawn. It must be said that the guards outside were already familiar with these words, their eyelids didn't even move. Emperor Li's personal attendant carefully held the small box. Just now, he almost didn't catch it and it really fell to the ground. Perhaps, not long after, his head would fall to the ground. He waited until Emperor Lu Qingdi almost vented his anger before he hesitated whether to present it or not. Stupid slave, still not bringing it over. Emperor Lu roared. Don't look at how Prince Jin was arrogant in front of Emperor Lu, other people would still tremble in the face of his anger. Emperor Lu Qingdi held the box and subconsciously wanted to throw it away, but in the end, he couldn't bear to and put it down. Prince Jin personally picked the tea. Before this official made the tea, he instructed this official to make sure it was done well. After tasting it, he left more than half of it to be presented to His Majesty. If it wasn't for Luo Peishan's words not long ago, how could Emperor Lu do this kind of shameful thing? But there was no other way. As the saying goes, only things that people couldn't ask for would make people think of them and feel that they were precious. His other sons would give him some good things from time to show filial piety, but this evil creature, other than longevity, he never gave him anything. Even if it was longevity, the things that were sent were basically his rewards. Even if it was just a simple change, he wasn't willing. Being so perfunctory, so careless, Emperor Li's heart was very stifled. But unfortunately, he didn't treat imperial concubine Su like this. Food, clothing, all kinds of things, imperial concubine Su could receive them. Although it wasn't a lot, it couldn't resist that kind of intention. Every time, Imperial Concubine Su liked it very much. Imperial Concubine Su also very unkindly went to Emperor Lu to show off, making Emperor Lu more and more depressed. It was fine if it was just Imperial Concubine Su, but there was also Princess Min Xiang. Although the number of times was much less than Imperial Concubine Su, it was still far better than someone who didn't have anything. Therefore, if Princess Min Xiang had any opinions about Li Hongyuan, Emperor Lu would definitely be the first to show a black face. Your sixth imperial brother is so good to you, but you actually don't know what's good for you. Therefore, good and bad were all judged by comparison, but Emperor Lu just didn't compare this son with the other sons. Alright, the more those sons did, the more it meant that they had ulterior motives. It wasn't easy for his son to think of giving him something, and it was even personally picked by him. How could he not be happy? Naturally, after Li Hongyuan didn't present it to him for a long time, he couldn't help but take the initiative to ask. The most infuriating thing was that this vile spawn still deliberately angered him in the end. However, after his anger subsided, Emperor Lu held the box and chuckled. He called over the palace maid who was the best at making tea and had everything moved to the study, boiling water and making tea right under his nose. Then, he personally took out a small portion. That small amount seemed to be able to clearly see how many there were at a glance. Seeing him treasuring it so much, the palace maid's hands trembled. It had to be said that as the emperor, what kind of good tea in the world hadn't he drunk before? Sometimes, palace maids like them would be able to bask in some of his glory. But now, the palace maid felt that if she dared to spill even one, he would. Emperor Lu Qingdi stared straight at it. Just as he mixed the tea, his nose twitched, as if the room was already filled with the fragrance of tea. His two sons watched from the side, having the urge to cover their eyes. Their father's current appearance was really a bit unbearable to look at. Their hearts were filled with resentment and unwillingness, but more than that, they were helpless. They worked hard and suffered untold hardships, but they might not be able to get a smile from him. In the end, they were often suspected of having ulterior motives. But that person, he was relaxed. Perhaps, even if he sent a blade of grass, it would be regarded as the most peculiar and rare grass by their imperial father. Even if it wasn't a treasure, it was still a treasure. The Gong prince's face was already a bit embarrassed, but Prince Rui was as usual, even jokingly asking Emperor Lu Qingdi for a sip of tea. Can you be short of a sip of tea? As expected, he was rejected, but his expression didn't change. Emperor Lu Qingdi impatiently tasted the tea. Obviously, it wasn't steeped yet, it was still boiling hot, but he inelegantly blew on it and drank a little bit. That expression of enjoyment was like tasting the finest nectar. Prince Rui's expression was also a bit difficult to maintain. https://11/11807/66532222. Biku Pavilion Mobile Reading Website, M. Chapter 200. When Lu Qingdi finally finished his cup of tea, Prince Rui and Prince Gong finally asked to be excused. Standing here was simply suffering, so out of sight, out of mind. Perhaps they were provoked by Lu Qingdi, but after the two left, they didn't even bother to maintain the brotherly respect on the surface. They each returned to their own homes, each looking for their own mother. The resentment in Li Hongming's heart had reached a critical point. If he didn't vent it out, he might really do something unexpected. When he saw Imperial Consort Su, he directly kicked out all the servants, even forgetting basic etiquette and rules, venting his anger on Imperial Consort Su. The only place where he could reveal his pure emotions was Imperial Consort Su. Imperial Consort Su was calm and composed, leisurely drinking tea. When Li Hongming finally calmed down, she spoke with a bit of apology, "Are you done?" Mufei, Aken was rude. Aken asks Mufei for forgiveness. Imperial consort Su had always been strict with Prince Rui, but when he was in a bad mood, she was a gentle and loving mother. It's nothing more than your sixth brother and your imperial father's filial piety that made you unhappy. You're a big man, someone who wants to ascend the throne, yet you're acting like a spoiled girl. What's wrong with you? Li Hongming's face was a bit ashen. Mufei, don't confuse the main point every time. Imperial consort Su glanced at him faintly. This consort told you a long time ago that your imperial father won't pass the throne to your sixth brother. How many times has this consort told you not to take your sixth brother's favor to heart? Why don't you listen and insist on pestering him? Mufei wants Aken to feel at ease, or at least explain things clearly to Aken. You always want Aken to feel at ease, but in fact, Aken only sees Imperial Father as his son. We're nothing. Imperial Consort Su was silent for a moment, quietly looking at Li Hongming. If you have any trust in this consort, you shouldn't say such things. Li Hongming's lips squirmed. Mufei, Ken just feels terrified every time I see that scene. Your sixth brother is a devil. Even if the throne is passed to a child who is crying piteously for food, it won't be him. You can rest assured now. She had kept this secret for so many years and had repeatedly brushed off Li Hongming. However, at this moment, she easily revealed the truth. Li Hongming's face was full of shock. Back then, I personally saw the imperial noble consort die. I personally saw your imperial father cut open her belly. When your sixth brother was born, he didn't have the right to inherit the throne. As for the other things, no matter how much he obtained, it was only right. A large part of the reason why Ben Gong was able to obtain your imperial father's trust for so many years was because of the imperial noble consort and your sixth brother. As for the imperial noble consort's death, Ben Gong wants. When you ascend the throne, don't bother with your sixth brother. At that time, you will be the ruler and he will be the subject. He won't cause trouble for you anymore. As for the matters of these years, compared to your other brothers, you didn't suffer any actual losses. Li Hongming was silent for a moment before he gradually digested Imperial Consort Su's words. Even if sixth brother is a devil, it's naturally inauspicious. Imperial Father isn't afraid. Your Imperial Father is the true Son of Heaven and will naturally be protected by the heavens. Your sixth brother has no power or influence. He's just an idle prince who can't affect the fate of the country. Furthermore, the Imperial Noble Consort is Imperial Father's favorite. Your sixth brother is the only thing she left behind, whether it's a person or an object. Furthermore, Imperial Consort Su paused. The Imperial Noble Consort was personally killed by your Imperial Father. In summary, if Yuan was born before her death, you really wouldn't have a share of this country. You'd better be sensible. The news that Imperial Consort Su threw out one after another made Li Hongming a little confused. Imperial Father killed the Imperial Noble Consort. Regarding this, you don't need to know the specifics. It won't do you any good. In the future, you just need to do your job well. You know your sixth brother's temper. If there's nothing, don't provoke him. As for the rest, as long as your Imperial Father isn't completely muddle-headed and sticks to his bottom line, no matter what he does to your sixth brother, you just need to keep silent. Li Hongming took 2 deep breaths. Although he wasn't afraid of people like the devils, it wasn't good to provoke Li Hongyuan. In the future, he would naturally stay far away from them. Imperial Mother, Imperial Father is so good to sixth brother. Will sixth brother, it doesn't matter if he will or won't. Ambition is linked to the power in one's hands. Your sixth brother is living unscrupulously. Do you think he can't see clearly? The limitless sacred favor of the Emperor could easily cause one to lose their way. If one couldn't see clearly, they wouldn't be who they were today. After all, Having the favor and not having the authority was enough to drive a person completely crazy. Ming, in terms of intelligence, none of your brothers can compare to him. Moreover, Li Hongming didn't know what Imperial Consort Su's unfinished words were. However, his Imperial mother had always been gentle and dignified. Other emotions might be shown when she was fighting with the concubines, but even then, it was mostly an act. Thus, it was really hard to detect when her true emotions were. However, at this moment, his complexion was really not good. He knew that it was just like how Imperial father killed the Imperial noble consort. He shouldn't ask about the specifics. You should be able to feel at ease now. Imperial mother, Aken is ashamed. Li Hongming lowered his head with a bitter expression. Just don't be so suspicious. If there's nothing else, then go back. Imperial mother is tired. Imperial mother, rest well. Aken will take his leave. The only people who knew about what happened today were me and your father. Don't let a fourth person hear about it. If any rumors were to spread, it would definitely anger your father. After so many years, he has always felt guilty, but he is also deceiving himself, as if he has forgotten what he really did. If his wounds are opened again, the consequences are not something we can bear. Imperial mother, don't worry. Aken knows the severity of the matter. Go. Li Hongming's mood suddenly brightened up like a June day. All along, the opponent he was most afraid of was not Prince Kong, but Li Hongyuan. Because imperial power was supreme, no matter how much power you had, you couldn't resist an imperial edict. Even if you could kill the emperor and usurp the throne, you would still be a traitor. You would be criticized by later generations if you didn't have a proper title. Now, what he was worried about had never existed. Except for Li Hongyuan, who could compete with him in terms of the degree of favor. In addition, he had power in his hands. Ha, ha ha ha. Li Hongming's smile was obvious. He almost looked up to the sky and laughed. Devil, these two words slipped from the tip of his tongue again and again. Ignoring Li Hongyuan's wanton arrogance, he became an inauspicious person in Li Hongming's eyes. A pitiful worm. Li Hongyuan didn't know Li Hongming's thoughts. If he knew, he would probably just sneer. A pitiful worm. What kind of expression would he have when he was stepped on by a pitiful worm like him in the future? For the sake of a so-called good reputation, he was timid. This thing was not even a fart in Li Hongyuan's eyes. Not to mention usurping the throne, even if the world was plunged into misery and suffering, he wouldn't bat an eyelid. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been a notorious tyrant in his previous life. The surrounding countries all shrank their heads and acted like cowards. Prince Rui returned to his own courtyard in a good mood. However, as soon as he entered the door, he was informed that concubining had been making a racket and wanted to see him. To Li Hongming, Lu Jingying had lost her value. However, she still had a child in her belly. Although he didn't really care whether he had a son or not, having a child would still be more beneficial to him. At least no one would hold on to this point and not let it go. It wasn't like he was ascending the throne when he was still young. For adult princes like him, having an heir was also an important factor in whether or not they could ascend the throne. This was because the family valued inheritance, and the emperor was even more so. Li Hongming thought about it and decided to go see her. At least, he wanted her to know her place. If she kept making a ruckus, it would be annoying. Lu Jingying finally saw Li Hongming. Tears streamed down her face. She was very pitiful. Your Highness. She even forgot the rules and threw herself into his arms, sobbing. Before, Li Hongming might have been patient enough to coax her. Now, his face was full of impatience. Because he felt the clothes on his chest were wet, he showed an extremely disgusted expression. You're all dead. Why aren't you pulling her away from this prince? Feeling Li Hongming's cold air, before the servant girls could do anything, his personal attendant had already stepped forward and pulled Lu Jingying away from Li Hongming's body. Perhaps to prevent her from not letting go of his master, the personal attendant secretly used underhanded means to break her fingers. Lu Jingying cried out in pain. She felt that her fingers were about to break. Lu Jingying was probably used to being arrogant recently. She didn't even think before she threw a slap. "Lowly servant, you have big guts." Ever since he became Prince Rui's personal attendant, there were a lot of people who tried to curry favor with him. When Wang Fei spoke to him, she would always have a somewhat amiable expression. Other than when his own master lost his temper, it was probably only when he was kicked by Prince Jean. That living king of hell, no one could afford to offend him. Even if he was kicked, it would be in vain. Don't expect anyone to make a decision for him. But now, a little concubine slapped him. Resentment flashed through her eyes. With a bit of grievance, she quietly retreated behind Prince Rui. When you have value, you're a treasure. When you have no value, you're just a blade of grass. Li Hongming's face immediately darkened. He was a man who preferred gentle and chaste women. He didn't mind the occasional slow taste, but once he was tired, no matter what he did, it would be wrong. With a backhand slap, Lu Jingying was directly knocked to the ground. Lu Jingying covered her face. There were still traces of blood at the corner of her mouth. She didn't dare to look at Li Hongming. The man standing in front of her, he wasn't her husband, right? Clearly, a few days ago, he was still hugging her and whispering sweet nothings into her ear. "Wang Ye, you hit me." Daring to address Wang Ye as "you and I," concubining, please pay attention to your status. The personal attendant behind Prince Rui reminded. Li Hongming couldn't see it, but Lu Jingying could clearly see the disdain and malice in his eyes. https://11/118007/6653223 Chapter 201. Luo Jingying was completely stunned at this moment. Her mind went blank for a long time. She couldn't return to her senses and didn't get up. The servants also looked at her coldly. Not only did they not go forward to help her, they even retreated a little. Everyone could see that concubining had fallen out of favor. No matter if it was the servants who were sent to serve her early on or when she showed signs of pregnancy, they couldn't stand her temper. When the prince was around, she was obedient and charming. When the prince wasn't around, she was arrogant and domineering and didn't put anyone in her eyes. She was also unusually harsh to the people around her. She was generous when rewarding people, giving out gold and silver jewelry as if they didn't cost money. Unfortunately, she only had 2 or 3 people. Obviously, these people only had the sweetest mouths and were the best at flattering her. As the saying goes, don't worry about scarcity, but worry about inequality. A few people were rich, while many people were poor. How could she win people's hearts if she relied on her preferences? The sharp pain in her stomach made Luo Jingying come back to her senses. She hugged her stomach and cried out in pain, but still, no one bowed to her. She had played tricks many times. When she was favored, they were still willing to surround her. But now, however, seeing that her complexion was indeed not right, the 2 mamas looked at each other. Hurry and help Shiqiang up. As they spoke, they stepped forward to take her pulse. This time, they were shocked. Hurry and call the manor doctor. This time, the servants were really a little panicked. Even if concubining was no longer favored, she was still pregnant. Under the circumstances where the prince didn't have an heir, this child was very precious. It was fine to step on a concubine who had fallen out of favor, but stepping on a concubine who was pregnant and out of favor was a big problem. If something happened to the child, they would definitely be the ones to suffer. Luo Jingying was helped up and sent back to the room to be placed on the bed. Then, she found that there were bloodstains on her dress. Seeing this situation, everyone's heart jumped and they hurriedly notified the servants. The food doctor came quickly, followed by Princess Lu. Previously, Luo Jingying caused trouble, so the food doctor found that there was a slight change in the baby's energy, but it was not a big problem. How did you serve her? Everything was fine before. Princess Lu was very angry because she gave birth to the only 2 children in Prince Roy's mansion. Because of this, there were many rumors outside. They all said that she was playing tricks. Especially after the death of those concubines, she also hoped that Prince Roy's mansion could have more children, regardless of gender. Now, because of the special situation, it would take at least half a month before it could be announced to the public. Even the other 2 concubines in this courtyard didn't know, so naturally, they couldn't do anything with great fanfare. What happened? Hurry up and tell this princess. They couldn't bear the title of the main culprit, so they hurriedly explained the matter. Princess Lu was silent. When Prince Roy arrived, Princess Lu hesitated for a moment. Your Highness, concubine Ying's health is very heavy now. Why don't we deal with it after she gives birth? Prince Roy furrowed his brows. Clearly, he knew that it was his fault for slapping the child just now. It was one thing to be annoyed by Luo Jingying, but the child was indeed his, and he still went to the bedroom. At the moment, Luo Jingying's face was pale and she was in a coma. She was moaning in a low voice, obviously enduring the pain. Perhaps because she sensed something, she opened her eyes. The moment she saw Prince Roy, she felt indescribably wronged. Tears welled up in her eyes. Your Highness. In the end, she wasn't stupid enough to argue with Li Hongming at this time. Li Hongming sat down by the bed. When Luo Jingying reached out to hold his hand, he didn't shake it off. However, as Luo Jingying whined and complained about how abominable her 3rd sister was, she accused Li Hongming of not helping her and even hitting her for a servant, etc. Li Hongming showed impatience. If I knew you were so stupid, I wouldn't have wasted time on you. Until now, she still couldn't see her situation clearly. Her mind was only filled with love and affection. Her family was such a powerful backer, but she made a mess of it. Now he finally understood why Luo Peishan found an excuse to not let him directly take her as a concubine. It was obvious that he threw her to him as an abandoned person. If his status was high, it would be bad. Seeing him leave heartlessly again, Luo Jingying's hand was raised in the air as if she was struck by lightning. When Li Hongming was about to turn around the screen, she suddenly stood up and wanted to chase after him. Her current situation didn't allow her to run around. Naturally, she was pushed back by her nanny, who comforted her, gently, and asked her to put the child first. Prince Roy just said a few words to Princess Lu. Princess Lu squatted. See you off, Your Highness. Even though she already knew what kind of person this man was, she couldn't help but feel cold in her heart. She looked at the bedroom again. After all, she was still a little girl who didn't know anything. She was naive and ignorant. Princess Lu stood for a while and then went in. Yesterday, she was arrogant in front of her with a face full of arrogance. Now, she was like a withered flower. Maybe she was still worried about the child, so she didn't make trouble. Princess Lu waved the servants away and sat down by the bed. When she was in the Luo family, Jingwan was her #1 enemy. In Prince Roy's mansion, Princess Lu was her #1 enemy. With hatred and resentment in her eyes, she said, Princess, are you very proud of me now? Her words were sharp. Sure enough, besides love, there was also resentment that could cheer a person up. Princess Lu didn't get angry. She deliberately lowered her voice and murmured, the most ruthless royal family is the royal family. Men in the royal family only have interests and power in their eyes. You are the granddaughter of the Minister of the Ministry of Official Personnel Affairs, which is your greatest value. You tore up all the cards. If you could get along well with the Luo family and make the Luo family think for you, he would probably not be stingy with his sweet words to coax you. Now that she was like this, she should put away her little temper and take care of the fetus. Even if she had no value, at least she would have a child. What the prince hated the most was the women in the inner courtyard making trouble. The prince's attitude is so obvious. Don't tell me that you still have fantasies about him. Princess, you are really good at instigating. Princess Lu looked at her quietly. It was obvious that she had believed most of it, but she still refused to admit it. Her body was trembling because of fear, but she was still so cowardly. How long could she live like this? Don't get excited. You still have a child. The child is your life-saving charm now. If you lose the child. After you entered Prince Rui's mansion, you offended a lot of people. Without the prince's support, you should know the situation you are facing. Don't tell me that you don't even know this. With the child, those people won't dare to go too far, and you won't be punished too much. Be careful. Don't be so naive. That's all I have to say. Princess Lu stood up. Luo Jingying suddenly grabbed her and asked, why? They were enemies. Why would she be so kind to tell her these things? Why? Princess Lu didn't know why. Maybe it was because Luo Jingying reminded her of someone she once knew. She did everything for a man. She was like a moth darting into a flame. She could imagine her tragic end. Or maybe she thought that she still had a conscience and pretended to be a good person. Princess Lu pushed her hand away and said, it seems that you won't give up so easily. The Luo family is your only chance to turn the tables. If you can ask your grandfather to help the prince will favor you more than before. In fact, what Princess Lu said was true. In just one day, she fell from the clouds to the mud. No one would be willing to accept it. It shouldn't be like this. It shouldn't be like this. He said that he liked her. Why was he so fickle? Or was he just lying to her? Was it really because of the Luo family? Luo Jingying was furious and resentful. However, the pain in her abdomen made her come back to her senses. She flattered the powerful and stepped on the weak. Therefore, nothing could happen to the child. Absolutely nothing. Come on, bring the medicine. Bring the medicine. Princess Lu walked out of Luo Jingying's yard. She paused for a moment and turned to Li Hongming's study. Li Hongming was practicing calligraphy. Princess Lu knew Li Hongming's mood very well because they had been married for many years. Although he was upset today, he was in a good mood, especially after he came back from outside. Greetings to the prince. Princess Lu, you are here. Li Hongming put down his brush and reached out his hand to her. Princess Lu took the opportunity to hold his hand and snuggled into his arms. She looked at the calligraphy on the table. It seemed that he was in a good mood. Without guessing why, she just smiled and said, your handwriting is getting better and better, Your Highness. Li Hongming also chuckled. This was rare for him in his own territory. Is there anything wrong? Concubining will be fine. Don't worry, Your Highness. Princess Lu, you can deal with these trivial matters. I believe in you. Li Hongming said casually. After all, she has just been married. She is arrogant and willful. She will gradually become better. Please be more tolerant of her. Princess Lu, you are so kind. Li Hongming said ambiguously. Princess Lu and I should have a son. As he said this, he directly carried Princess Lu and walked to the inner room of the study. Princess Lu exclaimed in a small voice. Then she pouted coquettishly, which made Li Hongming laugh. Princess Lu was once again sure that her prince was in a good mood. He would not do this kind of thing usually. Great Elder Princess invited Jingwan to stay until the evening. Jingwan was really in line with her fantasy of a daughter. Her biological daughter could never reach the height of Jingwan. Therefore, she was very good to Jingwan. She even asked her youngest daughter, Wingzhu Yuyao, to learn more from Jingwan. Jingwan blushed with shame. She didn't know how an ignorant and incompetent person like her had become someone else's child. Fortunately, there was a large age gap between her and Wingzhu Yuyao. Wingzhu Yuyao wasn't a sensitive and naive child, and she really liked her. Otherwise, if she heard her mother say such things, her heart might become twisted and dark. https://11/11807/6653225. Mobile version website, M. Chapter 202. As expected, when Jingwan left Great Elder Princess's courtyard, she took away a lot of good things. However, it was impossible to refuse these things because Great Elder Princess would not take them back just because she said no. Every time she did this, she was ignored and mercilessly driven away by Great Elder Princess, and this time was no exception. But just now, Jingwan pulled Wingzhu Yuyao and said with a smile, Yuyao, my foster mother gave me all the good things, and you have no dowry in the future. So, little girl, quickly stop your mother. Wingzhu Yuyao smiled innocently, it doesn't matter. I have no dowry. Sister, you can prepare a dowry for me in the future. My sixth cousin is very rich. When you become my sixth cousin's wife, I will definitely double the money. Even Great Elder Princess was a little surprised, let alone Jingwan. Great Elder Princess frowned slightly at first. If others knew it, they would think that she was coveting Prince Jin's things, and now she was nice to Jingwan. She was Great Elder Princess. Even if she was not as rich as her sixth nephew, she was much better than other princes and nobles in the capital. After all, she had a good relationship with the emperor. She had rich fields and shops and a lot of rewards every year. Not to mention that she only had one legitimate daughter. Even if she had 8 or 10 more daughters, she would definitely get married in a grand way. Yuyao, who did you hear these words from? My father told me. Yuyao betrayed her father without any hesitation. Great Elder Princess naturally knew what kind of person her husband was, and he would not say such words to Yuyao for no reason. Great Elder Princess looked at Jingwan and said helplessly, your adoptive father is an idiot. Jingwan smiled. Even if he was her adoptive father, he was still a stranger to her, so she didn't know how to respond. However, although Prince Consort Jiang didn't like the affairs of the imperial court like her father, he was not picky in dealing with people. There should be a reason why he talked to Yuyao like this. If Yuyao made a scene because Great Elder Princess was kind to her, it would make everyone embarrassed. If someone said something to Yuyao and let him know, it was very likely that he comforted Yuyao with these words. In Great Elder Princess's mansion, Great Elder Princess held all the power. However, as far as Jingwan could see, although the gifts used by her daughters-in-law were good, they were not as good as those given to her. Therefore, it was natural that they did not like Jingwan. It was useless to complain to their own husbands, but it was very possible to incite Yuyao. Jingwan reached out and pinched Yuyao's face. You're really clever. Okay, I'll prepare your dowry in the future. Although it's not as good as your mother's, it's not a problem to add a few % to your dowry. I'm sure our Yuyao will be glorious. I don't want your dowry. I want sixth cousins. Okay. Jingwan was overjoyed. How old are you? You're so shameless to think about dowry. Great Elder Princess also felt funny. Yu Yao stuck out her tongue at Great Elder Princess in disdain. What Jingwan could think of, Great Elder Princess could also think of. After Jingwan left, she would definitely ask about it carefully. Great Elder Princess had always pampered her daughter and brought up her son. She was dissatisfied with all her daughters who had been married off. Now she loved her youngest legitimate daughter the most. How dare Jingwan instigate Great Elder Princess in her ears? When Jingwan saw these things, she also felt helpless. However, Great Elder Princess just wanted to protect her, so she couldn't really refuse her coldly. Therefore, if some people were unhappy, she could only continue to be unhappy. The next day, Jingwan received more invitations, which were basically sent by the girls in the boudoir. After staying in the summer palace for a few days, almost all of them had settled down. Naturally, all kinds of banquets began again. In summer, there were very few banquets. However, the summer palace was much cooler than the capital city. It was really boring, so they naturally had to find something to do. Jingwan read several invitations. It seemed that they had discussed it, and the dates didn't overlap. Jingwan thought that this might be a tacit understanding formed in the early years. After all, the summer holidays were almost at this time every year. At that time, they would set the dates of their banquets. If there were some deletions or additions, they would probably make adjustments again. To return the favor, Jingwan felt that she should also hold a banquet. However, she needed to think about the exact time and ask her sister-in-law about it. She would go out to attend 2 more banquets. It was better to follow a first-come first-served basis. Since someone had already set the time, there was no reason to force them to change it. Therefore, Jingwan turned to Sun Yijia. Sun Yijia's pregnancy had stabilized, but everyone was worried about her. She also planned to take more time to recover. Sun Yijia browsed through the invitations. Nominally, these invitations were set up by those unmarried girls. In fact, sometimes their mothers and grandmothers also sent some invitations. In the past, the banquet of the Minister of Official Personnel Affairs was set on June 20th. Now that grandfather is the Minister of Official Personnel Affairs, you can set the date on that day. With your current status, no one will be blind enough to go against you and fight for that day's time. With the Ruan family's current situation, they will definitely not hold a banquet. Furthermore, in the past few years, there were usually 2 cabinet elders who came to the summer palace. This year, there is 1 less cabinet elder, and there is 1 day left. If someone wants to fight for it, they will probably fight for 3 days. After all, although there is no rule that the time is arranged according to the status of each family, there are some people who think so. The closer they are to the front, the more they feel honored. Toward the end, Sun Yijia said with some indifference. Jingwan could roughly understand her thoughts. Based on her cold personality towards outsiders, she really didn't care about this kind of thing. Sister-in-law, did you send invitations here as well? Of course. Although it's not as valuable as before, I still want to save face. Moreover, the 3 of you are becoming more and more famous now. It's impossible for you to stop even if you want to. Look, you went out early this morning. You should know that this is all thanks to little sister Wan. Sun Yijia said with a hint of ridicule. It's because my 3rd brother is a genius. Jingwan said righteously. Those who didn't know would think that Jingwan was proud of her brother. Sun Yijia knew the inside story. She reached out and pinched Jingwan's face. She laughed and said, "You're getting more and more shameless. No one else would praise themselves as a genius." Jingwan slapped her hand away. It's true. Yes, yes, yes. A genius. In fact, Sister Wan was indeed worthy of this title. Jingwan wanted to play the zither again to give Sun Yijia's baby prenatal education. After she played 2 songs, Sun Yijia couldn't bear it anymore. She pushed her aside and played the zither herself. Jingwan didn't feel embarrassed. However, Sun Yijia didn't play for long. Just as Jingwan was about to leave, Sun Yijia handed her a small locked box and said in a low voice, "Sister Wan, you can go back and look at this by yourself. Don't worry and keep it. Don't think about rejecting it now. After you go back and look at it, don't think about returning it. If it's for you, it's for you." Jingwan naturally didn't want it. However, judging from Sun Yijia's expression, she really couldn't take it back. "Alright, I'll keep it. Sister-in-law, you won't harm me. I, Sun Yijia, have harmed anyone in my life, but it's impossible for me to harm you, little sister Wan. It could be said that you gave me a new life. If I harm you, I should be struck by lightning." Sun Yijia's voice was soft and slow, but it was unusually solemn. Jingwan was stunned. Then, she smiled and said, "So serious. I'll keep it well." As she spoke, she shook the small box in her hand. There was a slight clanging sound inside. It seemed that the thing inside was quite solid. After Jingwan went back, she knew that her sister-in-law must have her reasons for telling her to keep it well. She dismissed the servants and then took out the key to open the small box. She took out the brocade pouch inside. It was a silent shape. It should be a token. Jingwan's heart inexplicably beat a little faster. Whether it was in her previous life or in this life, she had never come into contact with something like this. However, she had seen similar things on television. Generally, as long as it was related, it was something that could take one's life. Jingwan opened the brocade pouch and took out the item. Very good. It was impossible to pretend that she didn't know the significance of this item. Then, she thought of her sister-in-law's words. She could only keep it with ease. If she really sent it back and used it as an excuse, it would really attract other people's attention. After keeping the item, Jingwan decided to ask her grandfather how much authority this thing had. Luo Peishan was sitting under the shade of a tree. A servant was fanning him. He was especially serious as he flipped through a book. Jingwan walked closer. Grandfather really doesn't do proper work. Even if he has free time, he should read proper books. Luo Peishan glanced at her in annoyance. This indecent book was also made by you. Jingwan, unruly, bowed. She took the servant's fan with a grin and sat beside Luo Peishan. It's not a big deal that granddaughter doesn't do proper work. But grandfather, you're different. 1 nose and 2 eyes. How am I different? Jingwan chuckled. When she was in Qi and prefecture, why did she feel that her grandfather was serious and unapproachable? Why did she feel that he was a standard scholar official? Sure enough, people couldn't judge others based on their own opinion. Grandfather, I want to ask you something. Luo Peishan glanced at her. Just as he was about to speak, he saw her glance at her servant. Thus, he understood tacitly and sent him away. Speak. What is it? Grandfather, how much do you know about the death exemption gold medallion? Luo Peishan paused. His expression was slightly cold. But in the blink of an eye, he restrained the expression on his face. His eyes fell on the book again and he spoke casually. Obviously, Luo Peishan didn't know as much as old Madame Sunday. At least, he didn't know that there was only one death-free gold medallion left. He only said what needed to be said and didn't ask anything else. https://11/118076653228 HTML chapter error. Chapter 203. Jingwan was different from the past. Even if there was a banquet hosted by a princess, no one would find fault with her. On the contrary, there was a group of people who complimented her. Even if she was not good at poetry, music, chess, calligraphy, and painting, even if she just sat quietly and acted like a little foodie, some people would still praise her. In fact, they were not simply circling around Jingwan. The various new skincare creams from Rouge Pavilion were a little expensive, but other than those exclusive sets, the rest were nothing to them. They did not feel any pressure to use them. Originally, no one would have investigated who made these creams. However, the Luo family had special privileges. Even if they were married, they would have enough preferential shares to use every month. Moreover, Jingwan herself was a moving living signboard. There would be a time when she would be noticed. Until now, these upper-class noble ladies basically knew that these creams were made by her. It was a matter of course. There had been no suitable opportunity before. Now was indeed the best time. As long as they were girls who liked to look beautiful, it was not surprising that they would look for Jingwan. Because these people knew their limits, Jingwan was also happy to tell them some skincare tips. As for whether there would be people who were greedy and thought that she did not tell the real secret, it had nothing to do with her. She was not obligated to do so. At most, these people would say a few words in private. They really did not dare to offend her in public. Therefore, it was quite good to have a big backer. Jingwan felt that as time passed, she would most likely fall. Because of such a relatively relaxed atmosphere, Jingwan even attended the banquets every day. When her biggest backer attacked her at night again, Jingwan was basically calm and collected. Seeing that a certain someone was simply hugging her to sleep, Jingwan even had the leisure to joke with him. For example, Yu Yao wanted to ask him for a dowry or something. Li Hongyuan only responded faintly. He would send it to her tomorrow. Jingwan just thought that he was joking. However, the next day, Jingwan didn't go to the banquet because she was called by Great Elder Princess. No one dared to say anything in front of Great Elder Princess. Great Elder Princess ignored them. Jingwan looked at the things placed in front of her. There were a total of 10 things. 2 coral trees that were about half a person's height, a jade bottle that was more than a foot tall, a box of golden pink pearls that were soft and flawless, and a box of high-quality gems. TSK, the rough estimate of these things should be. Well, because things are precious when they are rare, they are not easy to measure. In some people's eyes, they might be priceless, and in some people's eyes, they might be worthless. However, there is no doubt that these are the treasures of treasures. Mother, these things are. Great Elder Princess looked at her meaningfully and said with a smile, Hongyuan sent someone to send it here. Jingwan's heart skipped a beat, but her expression didn't change. I see. They are for Yu Yao, Great Elder Princess continued. Isn't it normal for a cousin to give something to his cousin? Jingwan chuckled. Whether they are biological sisters, cousins, or cousins, Hongyuan has only sent something to Princess Minxiang. This time, he sent so many valuable things to Yu Yao and specified that they are her dowry. Great Elder Princess looked at Jingwan with a faint smile, which made Jingwan's scalp tingle. She didn't even know how to respond. If a cousin wants to add to his sister's dowry, he'll have to wait until she gets married. There are still many years to go. The crux of the problem is that he's not delivering the dowry as a cousin, but as a brother-in-law. Wan, help foster mother analyze the situation. Even though Jingwan was thick-skinned, she couldn't bear Great Elder Princess's gaze and her face was slightly hot. How can daughter guess what His Highness's intention is? But since it's been sent here, adoptive mother will help Yu Yao keep it. Great Elder Princess nodded seriously and said, well, since Wan asked me to keep them, I'll keep them for Yu Yao. It had nothing to do with her. She didn't want Yu Yao to do as she said, no problem. Well, if she hadn't said something wrong last night, she wouldn't have been laughed at today. However, he still made a mental note to Li Hongyuan. Although he made a mental note, he didn't know if there would be a day when he could settle the score with Li Hongyuan. Fortunately, Great Elder Princess didn't ask her when she said something to Prince Jean. Jingwan didn't want to lie to Great Elder Princess, who had also treated her as a family member. However, how could she tell her that her fiancé attacked her at night? Yu Yao had no concept of other things, but children seemed to be born with no resistance to bright round pearls and the like. Therefore, she coveted that box of pearls. After knowing that it was hers, she hugged it and refused to let go. Pearls were relatively common. Of course, high-quality pearls were rare and only a few people had access to them. White and pink pearls were more suitable for children. Gold pearls were noble and didn't match with children. But this box of pearls was gold and pink. Gold was not heavy, so it was okay for Yu Yao to use it now. The little girl already knew how to be beautiful. She clung to her mother and talked about what she wanted to use the pearls for. She wanted beads, earrings, bracelets, necklaces, all of them. Great Elder Princess seemed to be helpless, but her eyebrows relaxed and her eyes were smiling. It could be seen that she really doted on Yu Yao. However, as the youngest legitimate daughter of Great Elder Princess, she was born to be doted on. In particular, this princess didn't have an empty title like most princesses. She didn't get along well with her family and was not favored by the emperor. By the time it was June 20th, Jingwan's invitation had already been sent out. However, because old Madame Luo did not intend to interfere, she only invited unmarried young ladies to the banquet. The number of princesses and princesses was not small. It could not be helped. More than half of the people who followed the emperor to escape the summer heat were people with the surname Li. During this period of time, although she couldn't see them every day, she got to know them day by day, so she didn't feel any pressure to deal with them. The most difficult one to please should be Princess Minxiang, who had the highest status and was Jingwan's future sister-in-law. If she wanted to make trouble, she could only endure most of the time. However, Princess Minxiang was really afraid of Li Hongyuan. She wouldn't do anything that might offend him. Moreover, her mother, noble consort Su, also told her to get along well with her future sister-in-law. In fact, regardless of other things, basically not many people would reject Jingwan just by getting along with her. After all, Jingwan was very young in mind. These teenage girls were all treated as younger sisters. As long as they were not naughty children, she would be tolerant and considerate enough. In this way, they had no reason to dislike her. Although the purpose was to enjoy the flowers, in fact, Jingwan didn't prepare much flowers. Instead, she prepared a lot of food, various kinds of juice, and some ingenious little games. To put it bluntly, she prepared to let these children eat, drink, and have fun. She wanted to be the king of children. At the beginning, Jingwan only took the younger girls, such as Yu Yao and those who were about the same age as her. The others were more reserved, especially those girls who had just started to talk about marriage. Perhaps some people despised her in their hearts and thought that she was unruly and improper. However, as time went by, seeing that they really had fun, she seemed to have never been so carefree since she was a child. Moreover, at this time, everyone was the same. If they had fun, they would have fun. Probably no one would go out and say anything. Even those who took etiquette nannies with them were not criticized. Forget it, she would just drag her good sisters down with her. As for those who were really reserved and couldn't let go, Jingwan also prepared some elegant games that didn't require much movement, such as crossword puzzles. Because there were changes, it naturally wouldn't be boring. Then, there was the game of finding things according to the clues. The final thing would often be unexpected. Therefore, the girls who had never played these games couldn't help but want to play. And the final result was probably that they all went crazy from playing. Jingwan and the others were having fun here, but they didn't know that an urgent report was sent from the capital. Some areas in the south had continuous rain. Some experienced people said that the area would inevitably expand, and there would be a flood. Because Li Hongyuan had been paying attention to it for a long time, he naturally received the news. In her previous life, it didn't happen so early. Li Hongyuan thought that he could change people, but he couldn't change the sky. In her previous life, it happened late, which could only mean that the report was late. In the end, it caused such a big disaster. Some people had already been replaced by Li Hongyuan, so the same thing naturally wouldn't happen again. When Lu Qingdi received the news, he immediately gathered all the officials and sons. This kind of thing couldn't be neglected. If there really was a big flood, the consequences would be very serious. Although it hadn't happened yet, it was better to believe it than not. If they were prepared, there wouldn't be any losses even if they couldn't use it. And if they could use it, the losses would naturally be much lower. In this point, Lu Qingdi could definitely be called a wise emperor. And Li Hongyuan's time had come. My beloved officials, put your heads together and come up with a feasible solution as soon as possible. Don't say that you have groundless fears. I also hope that in the end, it will be groundless fears. Also, don't take things too simply and don't take it seriously. I want you to consider this matter in the worst possible way. Since Lu Qingdi had said so, the others naturally didn't dare to neglect. However, the Grand Secretary, Yuan Ruizhong, didn't stand for long and felt dizzy and weak in the knees. They hurriedly asked him to sit down, but there was no improvement. His complexion was particularly bad. Lu Qingdi hurriedly ordered someone to call the imperial physician. Yuan Ruizhong was suffering from heatstroke. Lu Qingdi's residence was located at the top of the mountain, which was the coolest place in the entire palace. In addition, there were many ice basins, so one could even feel the obvious coolness. But in the end, he was suffering from heatstroke. According to the imperial physician's explanation, Yuan Ruizhong was old and weak. When he went up the mountain, he was in a hurry and sweated. When he came here, it was suddenly cool and he couldn't stand it. Seeing him like this, Lu Qingdi frowned and finally sighed in his heart. He was indeed old. He waved his hand and asked someone to send him back. It was a busy time now, so it was troublesome to see Yuan Ruizhong's half-dead appearance. Yuan Ruizhong felt ashamed and hurriedly apologized. Speaking of which, it had been relatively peaceful for half a month. Everyone in the family closed their doors and he didn't hear any gossip. He only felt that it was as peaceful as before and his body seemed to be much more relaxed. He didn't expect that there would be a problem at this time. Was he really old? If he still stayed in the position of Grand Secretary like this, wouldn't it annoy the emperor? But it was indeed not a good time for him to resign. So he could only be thick-skinned and wait for the emperor to let him resign. Prince Rui watched Yuan Ruizhong being supported by people. Yuan Ruizhong's back was hunched and he left step by step. His mother was right. Yuan Ruizhong was really dying. He withdrew his gaze and focused on the current matter. Of course, no one would inform Li Hongyuan of such an important matter. At this time, he was living in a courtyard outside the palace again. He wasn't as leisurely as others thought. He was looking at the geomancy map. The information he received was far more detailed than Lu Qingdi's. He found the reported locations on the geomancy map bit by bit and calculated the range of the rainfall. After all, it had been too long in his previous life. He couldn't remember many things so clearly. Moreover, what he knew was limited. He frowned slightly and circled the locations of the granaries and important dams. Finally, he was 100% sure that the situation this time would be much better than in his previous life. Only then did he let out a sigh of relief. However, he still needed to find Luo Peishan for the specifics. There were many things that he needed to say. Master, Grand Secretary has gone back. Oh. How is the Ruan family? https://11/11807/6653229. HTML. Chapter 204. Li Hongyuan was non-committal. The flood in the south was the most important thing. Ruan Ruizhong had been muddle-headed for 10 or 20 years. He should be helped to wake him up. As for whether he would be unable to recover from the setback or even die, or survive and have a great change in temperament. If he was still young, the latter was more likely. Unfortunately, he was already old. Perhaps this scene would be too exciting and he would not be able to catch his breath. However, if he could pull through, Li Hongyuan would probably admire him. That would also mean that he would be oppressed by him for a few more years. Grind. Li Hongyuan was not interested in the things over there. He should tidy up the things that should be sorted out. Eunuch Mu hurriedly stepped forward and began to grind swiftly. It must be said that grinding could be considered his specialty when serving Li Hongyuan. He was fast and good. After he was done, he gently stepped back. Li Hongyuan spread out a booklet in the shape of a booklet and thought for a while. Then he picked up a pen and wrote very quickly. The words were like his person. The strokes were vigorous and powerful. However, ordinary people might not understand. Even if they were scholars, unless they liked it very much, they probably didn't study cursive. Luo Peishan was different. He had passed the imperial examination for decades and had a lot of time to study things other than the imperial examination. If he couldn't understand, Li Hongyuan would probably throw 4 words at him: "You have an undeserved reputation." It was said that a focused man was the most charming. Li Hongyuan was a handsome man. Perhaps because his marriage with Jingwan had been settled, he rarely had a gloomy aura. His eyes were handsome, and his expression was focused with confidence. Few people could not resist him. If Jingwan was present, she might be tempted at this moment. He wrote 2 or 3 pages in a row. Be careful. Be careful in case the woman of the Ruan family silences him. Ruan Ruizhong could not stand it and die, but he couldn't be killed. That would be too boring. Yes. In fact, there was no need for him to remind them. His subordinates would have considered this point. It had been a long time since they had done something for the first time. They had more or less figured out the extent to which they had to do to satisfy their master. Ruan Ruizhong was sent home because of his mental and physical exhaustion. Originally, Luqingdi's people wanted to send him to Madame Ruan, but Ruan Ruizhong refused. When he found out what his own backyard was like, he was very glad that he refused at this time. Otherwise, he would really lose face. It was quite strange for Rui to enter the house in such a state. In the past, when he returned home, even if his wife did not personally welcome him, she would arrange for someone to take good care of him. Now, he had been sitting in the hall for a while, but no one came to serve him. There was not even a sip of tea. He was already feeling unwell, so it was inevitable that he would feel unhappy. Knowing the current situation of the Ruan clan, Zhang Xian stood up and headed to the rear courtyard. The servants he met along the way were the same as usual. When they saw him, they saluted him politely. However, when they were approaching the main courtyard where the couple lived, they saw a maidservant running out in a panic. When she saw Ruan Ruizhong, her expression was as if she had seen a ghost. The first thing she did was not salute, but turn around and run away. She did not have the least bit of etiquette. Ruan Ruizhong's face darkened. Anyone who saw it knew that something must have happened. Although he did not know what it was, the way to deal with this kind of situation was almost the same. Go and stop her. Ruan Ruizhong's manservant obeyed the order and hurried to catch up. An ordinary servant girl in her teens could not be faster than a man who was a few years older than her. She was quickly caught up and then pulled back. The young maidservant knelt in front of Ruan Ruizhong, trembling and crying miserably. She kept kowtowing, "Master, I didn't see anything, I didn't hear anything, please don't beat me to death, I beg you, I beg you, what did you see? What did you hear? Say it clearly." Ruan Ruizhong said sternly. The servant girl seemed to realize that she had said something wrong. She glanced at Ruan Ruizhong in fear and quickly lowered her head. She knelt on the ground and trembled. No matter what, she refused to say a word. Ruan Ruizhong kicked her away. "Keep an eye on her." He went straight to the main courtyard. He wanted to see what kind of shameful things this family, or his stepwife, was hiding from him. Obviously, when Ruan Ruizhong entered the courtyard, he found that something was wrong. Usually, there were old maids guarding the gate of the courtyard. When he entered, he could see the servants performing their duties. But the gate of the courtyard was half open, and he didn't see anyone. Ruan Ruizhong subconsciously lightened his footsteps and did not push the half-closed door. After entering, he wanted to go into the room. However, he vaguely heard a sound. Following the sound, he found that it came from the pavilion in the courtyard. There was a curtain outside the pavilion. Under normal circumstances, it was down, but now it was down. A few days ago, it was his wife and daughter who accompanied him to admire the moon. Now, there was a woman's delicate panting and a man's rough panting. Moreover, there was more than one man. One of the men was obviously swearing, but the woman did not seem to be humiliated. Instead, she was more aroused and urged him. In exchange, another man's lewd laughter was accompanied by the sound of a palm slapping a certain place. No matter how embarrassing the voices were, Ruan Ruizhong knew who the three voices belonged to. It was his stepwife and his two sons. As if struck by lightning, Ruan Ruizhong stood rooted to the ground with a blank expression on his face. "Look at your hungry face. How long has it been since I fed you? But, even if you do it, can you satisfy me?" The woman did not speak, but she snorted obviously. "Actually, I want to know, whose child is Fang Fei? Father, one of our brothers, or some wild man outside?" That's right, that's right. Tell us, whose child is she?" Ruan Ruizhong's heart was much colder than the winter. It was so cold that his blood almost stopped flowing. "Why do you care who she is? Nominally, she is your sister. Do you want to touch her as well?" The woman said. In exchange, the two men laughed ambiguously. "The daughter you taught must be the same as you." Ruan Ruizhong clutched the clothes on his chest tightly. His heart seemed to be fiercely pinched, as if he was about to suffocate. He gasped for breath as if he would pass out in the next moment. At this time, a gust of wind caused the curtains around the pavilion to open a gap. That unsightly scene directly crashed into the depths of Ruan Ruizhong's eyes. His dignified and virtuous wife. He still remembered her shyness on the night of their wedding. From that night onwards, every time they got married, she would be abnormally reserved. Sometimes he wanted to do something, but he was afraid that he would offend her. As time passed, he began to enjoy the warmth of their relationship more and more. But now, she was so unrestrained. His two sons, even if they were not that outstanding, he was still quite satisfied. They were calm and steady, gentle and polite. If there were no accidents in the family when he retired, even if he could not become an official, he thought that the family would be harmonious. But now, they were like two beasts. He thought that the family was harmonious, and he thought that no one could compare to his wife and children. In the end, this family was a den of prostitution. His wife and children were all beasts. Pooh! Ruan Ruizhong could not bear it anymore and directly spat out a mouthful of blood. This scene happened to be seen by one of his sons. His pupils rapidly shrank and suddenly withered, as if he was scared silly. "Father." It was like a whisper. When the brother opposite him heard this, his body trembled. "What nonsense are you shouting?" As for Madame Ruan, she was skilled in martial arts. But because of her absolute trust in the people around her, coupled with the ups and downs of the sea of desire, she was only vaguely aware of the strangeness outside. When she heard the word father, she instantly recovered a lot. Just as she was about to get up, the person behind her suddenly pulled away and rushed out. "Father." It was accompanied by fear. No matter how deep he had sunk, he was now awake. Madame Ruan sat up with a whoosh, her expression stern. The man beside her was scared pale. Ruan Ruizhong, who had spat out blood, slowly fell down. But his eyes were filled with bone-piercing pain and bloodthirsty hatred. He was a scholar. He had the strength and bearing of a scholar. He was capable of doing things. Under normal circumstances, he was amiable. He had probably never shown such an expression in his life. So much so that the man who ran out wearing only a piece of underwear hesitated, not daring to go forward. "Old master, old master." The manservant who was in charge of guarding the young maidservant had somehow come in. Seeing the situation, he practically scrambled over to catch Ruan Ruizhong, who was about to fall to the ground. "Master, master." As he pinched Ruan Ruizhong's philtrum, he took advantage of the cover to give Ruan Ruizhong a pill. Ruan Ruizhong's eyes were still open, but he was still staring at the pavilion. That appearance was as if he had died with his eyes open. His son was trembling in fear. The ugly thing under him drooped. Such an ugly appearance, where was the modesty of a gentleman? Being stared at like that, his legs went soft and he knelt on the ground with a bang. As for the other two people in the pavilion, they tidied up their clothes and came out. Compared to the two men who were trembling in fear, Madame Ruan was much calmer. Although she was frowning, the focus was not on the fact that her husband had caught her in the act. She looked at Ruan Ruizhong indifferently. "How did you come in?" It had been so many years. Although she had never encountered this old thing coming back when he was not supposed to, even if she did, she would be able to know at the first moment. She would be able to pack up at the fastest speed, so that he would not be able to detect the slightest clue. It was reasonable to say that today should be the same. However, not only did Ruan Ruizhong break in, she did not receive any news at all. Because she was absolutely relieved, she let down her guard. So much so that she did not even know how long Ruan Ruizhong had been here. Ruan Ruizhong's eyes widened. His finger trembled as he pointed at his stepwife. You. She was caught doing such an unbearable thing, but there was no fear, no guilt, let alone repentance. It looked as if it was impossible for him to break in. The rise and fall of his chest became more obvious. Master, nothing can happen to you. If something happens to you, wouldn't it benefit these adulterous men and women? This bitch wants to anger you. If you die, no one will know about their scandal. In the future, the Ruan family will be completely controlled by her. So, you must hold on. You must hold on, master. Madame Ruan's gaze fell on the servant. Even if this servant was not one of her people, he usually gave her some information about Ruan Ruizhong's affairs outside. With the courage of a normal person, he should avoid this kind of thing. But now, he said such words. It would be strange if there was no problem. Madame Ruan was not in a hurry to deal with him. Instead, she looked around and did not see anything. However, the people who were supposed to be guarding outside did not appear. Madame Ruan suddenly smiled. She was very clear that she had fallen into a trap. This time, it was not her daughter who did anything, but her. And it was so ruthless. How many of her people did not know? That's right. In her opinion, being caught in the act by Ruan Ruizhong was not a big deal. If he did not know, there were ways to deal with it. If he knew, there were also ways to deal with it. Although relying on Ruan Ruizhong was beneficial, there were also disadvantages in the future. Her actions would be restricted. If he knew, the worst-case scenario was to kill him. The manservant's words seemed to have worked. Ruan Ruizhong took a deep breath and slowly stood up with the help of the manservant. He walked forward step by step. He used to care for this woman as much as he loved her. Now, he hated her as much as he felt pain. He swung his hand and slapped her. "Bitch, I've been so good to you, so good to you." Madame Ruan's head only tilted a little. The current Ruan Ruizhong was almost half dead. How much strength could his hand have? For her, it was not painful at all. "When I married you, you were already so old. I was still young and beautiful. Shouldn't you be good to me? Your body is not strong and not strong. Every time you are not interested, you are done. Isn't it normal for me to wear a green hat? You have many sons, so you don't have to look outside. Now, your sons are almost useless. Your grandchildren can be found. They are young enough and there are many of them." Paw. Ruan Ruizhong was so angry that he slapped her again. "You lewd woman, lewd woman." Madame Ruan sneered. She had been afraid of breaking the vases before. Now, she was a turtle in a jar. What else did she have to care about? The person hiding in the dark really knew everything about her. Then, she was almost certain that she would not die. Her value alive was far greater than death. So, she was now fearless. However, the other party did not make a move. Once he made a move, it was like a thunderbolt. This method was really likable. Moreover, everything was clearly under his control, but she did not notice it at all. This ability was really admirable. "Ruan Ruizhong, you can only scold me now. Other than that, what else can you do? Your life has been smooth sailing and you think you are infallible. What ability do you have outside? You don't even know what your own backyard is like. You were smart your whole life, but also stupid your whole life. How does it feel to lose your integrity in your later years? If I didn't believe you, that's why I said you think you are infallible, stupid. If you didn't disguise yourself so well," Madame Ruan sneered, "a 16-year-old girl married an old man like you. Would she treat the nest of children who are much older than her as her own? Consider it in all aspects. Do you think you are the emperor? How shameless do you think you are? You actually did not doubt it and wholeheartedly believed it. Then, you deserve to be played in the palm of your hand. You only have yourself to blame." Ruan Ruizhong was trembling with anger, but he could not say a word to refute. "Bitch, this old man wants you to die a horrible death, a horrible death. Whether I die or not, I'm afraid it is not up to you to decide. You have to ask the person behind you first." "What do you mean?" "What do I mean? For 10 or 20 years, it was hidden. Suddenly, it was discovered by you. No one got rid of the gatekeeper. How could you come in?" Madame Ruan now seemed to have a broken jar and did not care at all. However, until the end, no one knew what the result would be. As long as she was alive, there was hope. If she was dead, then it was all over. Ruan Ruizhong's first reaction was not anything else. His family's biggest scandal was known by an outsider. And as the head of the family, he actually needed an outsider's help to find out. How many people had laughed at him? Who is it? His old face was terrifyingly gloomy, as if he wanted to tear the other person into pieces. He seemed to be in better spirits than before. He really valued face more than the sky. What can you do if you know? Even if it was your past glory, I'm afraid you did not have the qualifications to make anyone shut up, not to mention the current you. What's more, I don't know. Madame Luan was no longer gentle and considerate towards Ruan Ruizhong. Instead, she raised her chin slightly and looked at him with disdain. Ruan Ruizhong really wanted to strangle her to death. Unable to bear it, he slapped her again. Sure enough, hatred could also support a person's spirit. This slap was heavier than the previous one. It was the best proof. You can also get angry at me. However, if you dare to hit me again, don't blame me for being impolite. There was a limit to her patience. The reason why she did not resist was because she wanted to keep a trump card. After all, she had never used martial arts outside. What if the other party did not know? Perhaps in the future, she could catch him off guard. Not to mention other things, it would be good if she could escape. Sure enough, when Ruan Ruizhong reached out again, she grabbed his wrist and threw it away. If Ruan Ruizhong was not supported, he probably would have staggered. It was said that a woman had 3 obediences and 4 virtues, and treated her husband as her sky. He had never seen a woman who had committed a heinous crime still be so insolent. Ruan Ruizhong's eyes were about to split open. Wei Shi, I can't do anything to others, but your Wei clan, Madame Ruan, no, it might be more appropriate to call her Wei Shi now. She laughed mockingly. Wei Shi, do as you wish. She turned around and kicked the man kneeling on the ground. It seemed like a casual kick, but it was enough to make people feel heart-wrenching pain. Wait until the person behind you comes and tells you how to deal with me. Then come again. He watched helplessly as she entered the room and closed the door, but he could not do anything to her. He cared about his family, his reputation, and his face. However, when he met someone who did not care about these things, the one who was afraid of taking action became her. That woman had nothing to fear, but the 2 in front of him were his sons. He was old, but the dignity of a superior was still there. The other one was so scared that he immediately knelt on the ground. Wei Shi's reaction and words had greatly surprised them. However, they did not have the courage. This was their father. Even if he really beat them to death, they would not dare to do anything. However, this did not prevent them from begging for mercy. Father, son knows his mistake. Please calm down. Don't be angry and harm your body. Father, it's all because of that bitch who seduced son. Otherwise, son would not dare to offend stepmother even if you gave son 100 guts. It's her. It's all because of her that our family became like this. Think about it, when mother was still here, our family was so good. Ruan Ruizhong paused. Thinking of his first wife, he felt sad for a moment. However, it was useless to think about it at this time. Ever since Wei Shi married into the family, he had rarely thought of his first wife. In the first few years, perhaps he wanted to go to the temple to do something for her and bury her in the ancestral grave. This was a long journey. Perhaps he could get some incense when the ancestral house offered sacrifices. Ruan Ruizhong staggered, obviously a little tired. Evil creature, get out and put on your clothes. He rolled and crawled away. Ruan Ruizhong glanced at the closed door, straightened his back, raised his head slightly, and went outside. He could now maintain his dignity in this way. However, the servant who was supporting him knew best that he was trembling slightly. Wei Shi heard all the movements outside. Sure enough, men were all the same. When they made a mistake, they would only push it to the woman. So what if she seduced him? In the beginning, he was someone who had married a wife and had a child. He was not a young boy who was in love for the first time. She hooked her finger and he would come over. Truly clear and honest, knowing etiquette, justice, integrity, and shame. Even a young boy would not hook up with his stepmother. Even if he would not reveal it, he would stay far away.